Lieutenant Mara Keene had mastered the art of quietness long before she ever stepped foot inside Falcon Ridge Air Base. Quietness was a cloak she wore by choice, a habit carved from years of learning that the loudest person in the room was rarely the one holding the real power. And so, when she arrived at the base with her muted voice, careful step, and eyes that rarely revealed what she was thinking, no one questioned her. They simply assumed she was new, inexperienced, maybe even shy. The truth, hidden beneath layers of classified documents and sealed records, was that she was anything but. Mara worked in the maintenance hangar, usually found leaning over engine schematics or inspecting fuselage plates with meticulous care. The other technicians respected her work ethic, though they joked that she spoke less than the ground power units. She would smile politely, almost apologetically, and return to her tasks. A faint smudge of grease on her cheek was often the only sign she'd been there at all. She knew the F-35 Lightning II better than most of the pilots who flew it. She knew how the aircraft felt on a good day, how the internal systems whispered when everything ran smoothly, how the vibrations changed when something was even slightly off. But despite her knowledge, she never set foot in the cockpit, not here, not publicly. Instead, she stayed grounded, watched, rebuilt, observed. Her past was a locked chest no one could pry open, not that people didn't try. Rumors swirled the way they always do on a base, small, aimless, buzzing bits of speculation drifting from one idle conversation to another. Some said she had washed out of pilot training. Others claimed she had been injured. One particularly persistent rumor insisted she'd once flown a combat sortie and panicked, losing a wingman. The stories contradicted each other so much that eventually people stopped asking and simply settled on assuming she had failed at something. People always assume failure when they don't know the truth. If anyone had bothered to check deeper, really deeper, into the classified archives, they would have found a very different story. They would have found that Mara Keene had been the youngest pilot to earn a seat in the experimental flight wing. They would have found flight logs filled with maneuvers so precise they bordered on impossible. And they would have found a single redacted incident report from a classified operation overseas. An event whose details were so thoroughly buried that even the highest-ranking officers on the base did not speak of it. Mara remembered every second of it, but she didn't think about it now. She focused instead on her present, on torque wrenches, diagnostic tablets, and checking coolant lines for microfractures. She preferred the work. It was mechanical, predictable, and silent. Machines broke for simple reasons. Humans broke for complicated ones. On the rare occasions she visited the flight line, a few pilots would nod politely. They barely recognized her, barely remembered her name. Why should they? She wasn't one of them. Not anymore. Not officially. Still, sometimes, on quiet nights when the hangar was empty and the sky hummed with faraway aircraft, she would run her fingers along the edge of an F-35's wing and feel a pulse of something she pretended she no longer missed. The sky, the weightlessness, the raw electric thrill of having nothing between her and the horizon but a canopy of reinforced glass. But that life was gone, or so she believed. Because the universe has a way of unraveling carefully maintained disguises at the most inconvenient moments. Secrets have a strange habit of colliding with fate, especially when jet engines are involved. And Mara Keene's silence, so carefully tended, was about to be shattered. Not by a rumor, not by a question, not even by a mission, but by a failing engine, and the moment the sky itself spoke her name. She didn't know it yet. She didn't know that the very next day the base would see her not as the quiet girl with grease-smudged gloves, but as something far different. Someone they had forgotten. Someone she had tried not to be. A fighter pilot. The next afternoon unfolded with the kind of deceptive calm that often precedes disaster. The sun lingered in a flawless sky, painting aircraft silhouettes across the runway as if the day itself had been designed for routine. No storms, no turbulence, no tension. The kind of day where pilots felt invincible and commanders wore relaxed expressions. Training sorties were scheduled. the type designed to keep pilots sharp, 4 F-35s in formation, practicing maneuver synchronization and rapid response drills. Mara was in the control tower, not because she needed to be, but because she enjoyed watching jets break the sky. She would never admit that aloud. The first 20 minutes were smooth, clean formation lines, crisp calls over the comms, the kind of flight that looked like choreography rather than aviation. Then came the sound, a noise that didn't belong, a sudden, vicious sputter like metal choking on air. Tower Alpha 2, something's wrong. The pilot's voice cracked beneath forced calm. Mara stiffened. She knew that sound. Every mechanic did. But she knew it more intimately, like a musician recognizing a sour note in a familiar song. On the tower screens, Alpha 2's telemetry flared red. Temperature spike, pressure drop, fuel flow anomalies, the trifecta of engine failure. Alpha 2, you're venting, confirm engine flameout, the squadron leader said. It's dropping out, losing thrust, trying restart. A harsh cough ripped across the comm. Then silence. Not radio silence, engine silence. Mara's heart lurched. Alpha 2, prepare to eject, the tower controller ordered, voice too calm to be anything but terrified. I can't, the pilot replied, breath quickening. The mechanism's jammed, seats not responding, I'm trying. Mara's hands dug into the railing until her knuckles drained of color. The ejection system on that model, she knew its flaws. Had argued about them once, in a meeting no one listened to. She felt the old frustration claw at her ribs. Altitude dropping fast, someone reported. The screens flashed lower and lower numbers. Too low to attempt manual restart. Too low for recovery protocols. Too low for hope. Alpha 2, eject now. It's locked, won't fire. Mara could hear fear strangling the pilot's words. Her mind moved faster than her body, assembling the situation in the precise, instinctive way she once had in the cockpit. Engine flameout, compromised restart, unresponsive ejection mechanism, descending at an angle too steep, too unstable. She didn't think. She didn't breathe. She simply moved. She sprinted from the tower. The crew shouted her name, unsure, startled, confused. No one chased her. They didn't understand yet. They just watched the quiet maintenance officer run harder than they had ever seen her move. She reached the ready locker, yanked it open, and pulled out a flight suit with hands that didn't tremble, not even once. Muscle memory guided her. Boots, suit, gloves, life support harness, helmet. Everything she had given up, she now reclaimed in seconds. The base alarms shrieked as emergency crews scrambled toward the runway, but Mara was running the opposite direction, straight toward a parked F-35. She vaulted the ladder. Hey, you can't, a ground crewman yelled. She didn't explain. She simply sealed the canopy. The engine ignited with a roar that rattled the hangars. Delta waves of heat rippled across the tarmac as the jet leapt forward. Tower unauthorized takeoff, someone shouted. Repeat, unauthorized aircraft rolling. Who the hell is in that jet? Then her transponder lit up. Keene, the tower fell dead silent. Mara Keene. Lieutenant Keene. How, since when can she fly? Keene. As in that Keene. But the aircraft was already airborne, slicing through the sky like a blade. She angled toward Alpha 2, pushing the throttle far beyond what regulation allowed. The G-force pressed her into the seat, familiar, punishing, welcomed. Her vision narrowed into a tunnel of blue and smoke trail. She was going to get there. She had to. No one else could save that pilot. Not in time. The quiet girl had vanished. The fighter pilot had returned. And the sky trembled. By the time Mara reached Alpha 2, the failing aircraft had slipped into a shallow spiral, falling toward the earth in a wounded corkscrew. The pilot's breathing filled the comms, harsh, panicked, disintegrating into gasps. Alpha 2, this is Keene. I'm on your wing. Silence. Then a stunned exhale. Keene, Mara Keene, how are you? No time, she said, sliding her jet dangerously close, wings almost brushing. Listen to me. We're going to stabilize you. Her voice didn't waver. It carried the steel of someone who'd walked through fire before and knew exactly how hot the flames could get. Below them, the earth seemed to pull upward, Mountains, roads, rooftops blurring together as altitude bled away. But Mara didn't look down. She locked onto the crippled F-35, studying its shutters, its uneven roll, the stuttering airflow over its tail surfaces. She recognized the pattern. It was the same flaw she had tried to warn engineers about years ago. "Your auto restart failed," she said, hands moving with the calm precision of a surgeon. "We're going to bypass the regulation loop manually. It's not responding. It will." She talked the pilot through each step, using terms only a test pilot would know, only someone who had flown the earliest prototypes would understand. The tower listened in stunned silence. "Keene, how do you know all this?" one controller whispered into a muted mic. "No record says she's a pilot." "No recent record," a senior officer corrected grimly. "But I've heard the stories, whispers, half-truths buried under classified files and sealed orders. Up in the sky, Mara ignored all of that. "Alpha 2, stabilize your angle. Match my descent." The pilot tried and the jet wobbled violently. "Easy," Mara murmured. "Follow my wing, I've got you." Her voice softened into something almost warm, almost human. "You're not alone up here." Something steadied in the pilot's breathing. Mara reached down, toggling her auxiliary systems. "On my mark, engage manual intake override." "That system isn't field approved." "It wasn't," she agreed. "Until today." She counted down, 3, 2, 1. A mechanical jolt shook Alpha 2. The engine coughed, a low, uneven rumble, then nothing. "Come on," Mara whispered. "Come on, don't quit on me." The failing F-35 lurched, an ugly final dip, then a small roar sparked life. The engine sputtered, caught, roared again, and held. "Engine restart," the pilot cried. "It's holding, it's holding." Cheers erupted in the tower, raw, explosive, disbelieving. Someone slammed a headset onto the desk, laughing breathlessly. Another officer wiped his eyes, but Mara didn't celebrate. "Stay with me," she said. "Throttle steady. Don't climb yet." She guided the trembling jet downward in controlled formation, flying so close she could see the pilots shaking hands inside the canopy. She didn't speak of her past, or how long it had been since she had last flown. She didn't speak of the incident that had taken her out of the sky. Her only focus was the pilot beside her. Together they descended through the trembling light, two aircraft moving in imperfect synchrony, one broken, one steady, until the runway rose up beneath them. "Alpha 2, you're cleared for landing," the tower said, though their voices were still quivering. Mara took the lead, lowering her gear. "Follow me, touch down at my pace." The landing was rough. Alpha 2 bounced once, twice, but it stayed upright. Both jets screeched to a halt. The silence after the engines wound down was vast. When Mara climbed out of her cockpit, helmets and goggles turned toward her from every direction. Mechanics stared. Officers stared. Pilots stared. The pilot she'd saved stumbled from her jet, breathless, eyes wide with disbelief. Someone whispered, awed, "She never stopped being a fighter pilot." And the sky, through the lingering echoes of jet engines, felt like it whispered the same. The runway crew recovered first, rushing toward the two jets with emergency kits and trembling adrenaline. But their urgency slowed when they reached Mara, as if getting close to her meant stepping into the aftermath of something mythic. The base commander arrived moments later, uniform crisp, face stormy. Yet even he hesitated before approaching Mara Keene. "Lieutenant," he said, voice dangerously soft, "you want to explain how you hijacked an F-35. She removed her helmet, letting the sunlight spill across her face. Her hair clung to her forehead with sweat, but her eyes were calm, unshaken. "I didn't hijack it, sir," she said. "I flew it." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd, technicians, pilots, officers. The pilot she had saved stepped forward. "She saved my life," the young woman said, voice breaking. "The ejection failed, I was done. If she hadn't—" The commander raised a hand, silencing her gently, though he swallowed hard before speaking again. "That still doesn't explain," he said, "how a maintenance officer managed to take off in an aircraft she was never cleared to fly, how she knew systems she was never trained on, or how she performed maneuvers most active pilots can't execute." Mara held his gaze. Because I was cleared to fly them, sir, before my file was sealed. That earned a new wave of murmurs, confused, incredulous, uncertain. The commander's jaw tightened. Your file was sealed because of the Riyadh operation. The crowd fell silent at that name. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mara exhaled slowly. The old memory flickered smoke, alarms, a teammate's scream, the world tilting violently. She pushed it aside. With respect, she said quietly, my file was sealed because no one wanted to admit the hardware failed. Not me. The commander stared at her, stunned. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, because he knew, deep down he knew. She had warned them about the malfunctioning intake system long ago. And today she had proven she was right. The pilot from Alpha 2 stepped closer to Mara. I heard the stories, she said softly. About Riyadh, I thought you quit flying because you froze. Mara looked at her, not angry, not offended. Just tired. I didn't freeze, she replied. My aircraft did. The honesty settled over the entire runway like a slow-moving wave. Finally, the commander sighed, long and heavy. Keene, what you did today was reckless, disobedient, possibly illegal, Mara nodded. Yes, sir. But, he paused, it also saved a pilot, prevented the loss of a $90 million aircraft, and exposed a critical system flaw that could have killed others. She didn't react. He blinked, then said quietly, You left the sky once. I don't think the sky was done with you. Mara's throat tightened. She had no words, not for him, not for the engineers gathering behind him, not for the pilots whose eyes brimmed with newfound understanding. The young pilot, shaken but alive, stepped close enough that only Mara could hear her whisper, Thank you for not letting me fall alone. Mara finally allowed herself a small, soft breath. No one should fall alone. As the emergency crews finished their work and the crowd slowly drifted back to their duties, the base felt different, charged, awakened. Stories would spread. Rumors would shift. People would speak her name again, not as a ghost from classified files, but as the pilot who had returned in the moment she was needed most. Mara stayed beside the aircraft a long time after everyone left, one hand resting on the cool metal of the jet she had flown. She looked up at the sky, endless, open, waiting. For years she had tried to silence the part of herself that missed this life. But now, with the wind brushing her face and jet exhaust lingering like a heartbeat in the air, she understood something simple and true. She had never stopped being a fighter pilot. She had just been waiting for the sky to call her name again. And today it had. The sun had nearly dipped behind the hangars when Mara finally left the runway. But the day's wait followed her like a second shadow. She walked toward the debriefing building expecting reprimands, investigations, maybe even suspension. She didn't regret what she'd done, but she anticipated the consequences with calm acceptance. Yet when she pushed open the door, an unexpected silence greeted her. Inside, the room was full. Pilots she had barely spoken to were standing shoulder to shoulder. Mechanics still in their oil-stained coveralls filled the back row. Even the base commander stood with his arms crossed. And in front of all of them, the young pilot she had saved, her uniform still rumpled, her hands still trembling. Mara froze. The commander stepped forward. Lieutenant Keene, he began, voice steady, protocol demands I issue disciplinary measures for your actions today. She nodded once. I understand, sir. But, he continued, voice lowering, there are times when protocol must bow to reality. He held up a printed report, Alpha 2's engine data, showing the catastrophic failure, the jammed ejection system, the restart sequence only a test pilot would have known. A sequence she had performed flawlessly. You didn't break regulation today, he said quietly. You filled a gap we didn't know we had. Mara didn't speak. A lump rose in her throat she hadn't expected. The young pilot stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her words did not. If she didn't fly, she said, I wouldn't be standing here. A murmur of agreement swept through the room, soft but powerful. The commander took a slow breath. Lieutenant Keene, effective immediately, your flight status is restored. Mara blinked, stunned. And, he added, I'd like you to consider rejoining the experimental wing. A hush fell. The sky had spoken her name once. Now the world was doing it too.